Hello, everyone. My name is Boyd Taylor. Welcome to this special presentation of Westminster Residents Present. Our guest speaker tonight is Westminster resident Julian Read, who will speak to us about the Kennedy assassination, which happened 57 years ago yesterday. Julian's book on the subject is titled JFK's Final Hours in Texas. An eyewitness remembers the tragedy and its aftermath. Julian's a Fort Worth native. He began work life at 18 as a sports writer for the Fort Worth Press. He was also a radio and television producer. At 24, Read founded Read Poland Inc., a public relations and government affairs firm that he moved to Austin in 1966. Over the years, he's been involved with scores of projects, including the San Antonio World's Fair, the launch of Southwest Airlines. I understand he still has an original bag of peanuts from that launch, and the opening of the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport in the 70s. He also worked on the South Texas Nuclear Project and the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. He helped with campaigns for former Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes and worked for former Democratic Representative Jim Wright, who would become Speaker of the House of Representatives. In 1963, Julian was an advisor to then Governor John Connally. Good evening, Julian. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Boyd. Nice to be with you.
So, Julian, I think all of us recall vividly where we were 57 years ago when we heard that the president had been shot. I was in a noon service club meeting up in Pampa, Texas, and the owner of the radio station interrupted our meeting to give us the news. And I suppose that everybody you talk to remembers that day. It's etched in all our collective memories. But you were in the motorcade, not far behind the presidential limo. Tell us how that came about. Start if you would at the beginning. Why was Kennedy in Texas?
Well, the short answer, Boyd, is that he was here for money. He had been wanting to come to Texas. He had heard all his life, I guess, about all those rich Texans. And after he was elected to president, he began to ask Vice President Johnson, as well as John Connally. John Connally, incidentally, had been his Secretary of the Navy. So he had a relationship of his own. But he had wanted to raise money. They came up with a story that they were coming down here to settle a squabble, a political squabble, that is, between the senator and Lyndon Johnson. Anyway, that was just a cover story, really. But they wanted originally to come down here and do 5 fundraisers. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Governor Connally said, no. If we're going to bring him down here, we're not going to do that. So we want the people of Texas to know the president. If they see him in a right light, they will like him. And that's the purpose of the trip. So he ended up doing 4 non-political events, Chamber of Commerce type things, and only one major fundraiser here in Austin. And that's what the plan was. And to set that plan off, of course, took a tremendous amount of work. I happened to be involved with it because I had done, as you mentioned, a lot of work for Governor Connally, his campaign for governor. I had been a counselor to him for all those years, well, the years between. So it would happen since we were the host, we meaning the governor was the host, the official host. I was helping him host the Washington Press Corps. The Press Corps came down here in hundreds of them They filled up one charter plane, all the top writers in Washington, because principally they wanted to see how Jackie was received and how the president was received. So that's how I happened to be down here on the trip, hosting on behalf of Governor Conley.
It was pretty unusual for Jackie to go on these kinds of trips. Was she reluctant to come to Texas, or do you know?
She had just come out. She had had a miscarriage of a child. And this was the first trip, I believe, that she had made following that after her recovery. So that there was obviously a lot of excitement built up around that. And everybody wanted to see Jackie, all the people that got invitations to come. I'll talk to you a little more about that. What you're looking at right now is the Texas Welcome Dinner, which was the big deal in Austin. That was to be the final event. And $100 a plate. This is in 1963. Yeah, that's a nice little sum.
That was a big ticket item in 1963.
That was a nice item, and it was a sellout. You couldn't get another chair in the place. So people began snapping up those tickets and making plans to come to Austin at that time. And if you see, I think we have another slide here of, yes, here we are. Here is the old people who've been in Austin very long will recognize this place. It was the old city of Austin, where we had all of our events.
It was a convention center, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll see the sign up there, welcome. So that was a big deal, a really, really big deal. All the hotels were sold out, but that's the event. So
how long were they how long did the schedule call for him to be in Texas?
Well, it was very brief, really. They came in here to San Antonio, did an event in San Antonio. You'll see that in a minute as well. San Antonio, flew from San Antonio to Houston, from Houston to Fort Worth to Dallas, and Dallas to Austin. And then to tie it all off, and one of the key points that was important for all the political watchers was that the president and first lady were spending the night at the LBJ Ranch, which of course never happened. But all of that was compressed in a very brief period of time, as you can see. You have a picture here of Ms. Conley, the hostess, meeting the Kennedys at the airport in San Antonio. She, of course, the president, Governor Conley, he had another role, so that's the reason he wasn't there on her arrival. But they were on their way to an Air Force base outside of San Antonio, dedication of a new resource out there. So they were on their way from the airport in San Antonio. This is a picture of when they landed in San Antonio. Here's a picture of the reception they got from that. There was all kinds of speculation of, will Texans like the Kennedys? There was speculation, nobody will like them. Well, hello, here they are with Jackie. So you can see that they're not exactly unhappy with her. But this was in San Antonio. We went then from San Antonio. I think we have a slide here, though. Here's a slide of the president speaking in San Antonio at the Air Force base down there, where he dedicated this facility, as I mentioned. Then they left there to go to San Antonio, to Houston. In Houston, they went to honor a very important member of Congress from Houston, who was head of a lot of finance that was important to the president. And there, Jackie took time before they went into the event to speak to the Latin American group that begged her to come. And the big shock, the big surprise to everybody was that she spoke to them in Spanish.
Oh,
Well, you
my.
can imagine
Yeah.
that made their day and night. So this was a big, big deal for the cultural side of the state, for the Hispanics. And so this preceded the other event. Then they went from there to Fort Worth. In
What is
Fort
this
Worth,
room? What is this
that was
room?
where they would spend the night in Fort Worth. And in Fort Worth, we had an interesting thing happen. The original suite where the Kennedys were to stay that night at the old Hotel Texas downtown, old timers will know her. Let's go back to the
Yeah, I
to the
lost
other
it there. Sorry.
to the other shot of the hotel, if I may. Yeah. At the Hotel Texas, as I said, the hotel where they were supposed to stay, about the time they checked in, or a little before they checked in, the Secret Service got nervous because there were two entrances or ways to get in and out of the suite. And so they freaked out on that. And if you can believe it, they actually moved LBJ and Miss Johnson into the top suite. And they put the Kennedys in a smaller suite, one that was not very grand. And when the arts community, the reception committee learned about this, panic set in.
Yeah.
And they set out to redecorate the suite that the Kennedys stayed in that night. And almost overnight, they gathered together several millions, tens of millions of dollars of the very finest art collections to be had anywhere in the city. And this was a redecoration job. Now, some of you decorators of today's world may not think of this as the most up-to-date look in the world, but it was a big deal that night, believe me. And so when the Kennedys steps set in, they were greeted by this incredible art exhibit, and they took the time to call the hostess that headed up this drive the next morning to thank her for this magnificent treat. Now, we're in Fort Worth now, remember. They spent the night in Fort Worth. Fort Worth was one of those nonprofit events, non-political events that Governor Connolly insisted on. It was a Chamber of Commerce breakfast. And it was a huge event, Chamber of Commerce breakfast. We had, before the breakfast, there had been a lot of consternation about the fact that those were all Chamber of Commerce people. The truth of the matter is, a lot of those people were Republicans. They weren't even Democrats, but they had snatched up these pictures, these tickets, and wanted to jam the place, and did. So Jim Wright, who was congressman, Democratic congressman, said, okay, we'll have a rally for the average person out, a free rally out in the parking lot across from the Hotel Texas. And sure enough, they had 5,000 people jammed into that parking lot for a surprise appearance of the president before that. And I believe, Boyd, if you go back one, you should be able to see a picture of that somewhere there. There's a picture of Kennedy speaking to that crowd.
I think this is it, isn't it? Isn't that Kennedy right in the foreground?
Well, this one's okay. We're going to see it in a minute, but there's another one. Should be one. This was the reception that they got after he spoke.
Yeah.
But there's a slide. There we are.
Yeah.
Here we have across the street from the Hotel Texas, and you can see welcome to Fort Worth. You have President Kennedy, LBJ, John Connolly, Senator Yarborough, and Don Kennard, who was one of my clients, who was a congressman, not a congressman, a member of the legislature, a senator of the legislature. And all of them right outside, you'll notice they have raincoats on. Well, there had a little drizzle of rain that started this event, and no one moved. Nobody left at all. And just about the time that they went back in to speak, the clouds opened up, and beautiful, beautiful spring, not spring, autumn evening, afternoon set up with beautiful sunset coming on the way, sunrise coming. Oh, anyway, there they are outside the hotel. Now that we go inside the hotel, you saw all that crowd that showed up out there to meet them. And now this is the crowd that met them outside in the parking lot. So that gives you an idea. You can see Kennedy's head. Now then, they go back inside, and here is the mob that was awaiting them. This is the Chamber of Commerce crowd, sellout, obviously. And everybody wanted to see Jackie. What's Jackie? Is Jackie going to show up? I was standing in the back of the room with another person, and she turned to me and said, "Do you think she's going to show?" And I said, "Are you kidding? Of course she's going to make her own entrance." And sure enough, after all the rest of them were seated, she did indeed make her entrance, and the place went crazy, absolutely crazy.
Including
so
the Republic, including all those Republicans. Huh?
Including all, oh yeah, everybody forgot their political identity. It's amazing. Anyway, this was the climax of Fort Worth. Then they jumped on a plane and flew. I believe that the flying time was 14 minutes from Carswell Air Force Base to Love Field. That was when Love Field was still operating. And here was the plane that brought them down from after they got in range of the airport. And here you see them. If you look at the bottom of this picture, and you'll see Eastern Airlines. Anyone in the crowd remember Eastern Airlines? Long time ago. But anyway, there is Mrs. Kennedy departing first. The president right behind her, and Miss Connolly, I believe, and Governor Connolly behind. Now, this is Love Field. There had been particular concern about Dallas because Dallas had become known as a city of hate because of some very bad things that happened there previously.
Hadn't they been particularly unpleasant to Mrs. Johnson?
That's correct. Mrs. Johnson had been insulted there, and also the U.S. dignitary to the United Nations had been had a very unpleasant experience. So there's a lot of worry about Dallas. The leadership of Dallas was very concerned. So the minute they landed, all the speculation, all the media, that charter airplane I told you about that was full of prominent members of the press corps from Washington who came to watch. They just couldn't wait to see what kind of reception that they would get in Dallas. Well, hello. Let's see what kind of reception they had in Dallas. Boy, let's see. There we go. That's the kind of reception they got in Dallas. That's just a tiny shot of what it looked like when they got to Dallas. So the Kennedys got all fired up because of this, obviously. They had Secret Service all around them. They left Secret Service and walked down the rope line before they got in the limo, you see here. Here's a shot that shows them crowding the crowd and just having a ball. It was a wonderful, wonderful reception. Great day. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the clouds had cleared, blue sky. It was a beautiful fall afternoon. Everyone was happy. It was a great experience. So then they get in the limousine, open air limousine. Originally, the plan was to have this limousine was closed, was not going to be open at all. And when the weather turned better, they said, okay, we're not going to wear a top. We're not going to have a cover. A very fateful decision, obviously. Yeah. But from there all the way downtown, crowds on either side, jamming, trying to reach them, trying to get their attention. It was just an unbelievable scene. And then finally we got downtown. I was in the White House press bus right behind them. And here's a very, very touching picture. The confetti coming down from the sky on either side. People were 6 or 7 deep, if you can believe this, on Main Street, on either side of the street and hanging out of the skyscrapers. It was an incredible scene. And just about this time, about a block before we made the turn, just about a block or maybe a block and a half, just before we made the turn to this building that you're looking at right now, Mrs. Kennedy, Mrs. Connally turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, you certainly can't say that Dallas doesn't love you."
Oh, God.
And we think those are the last words he ever heard. Because as we went head on to this building you see, look at that top floor. Look at the top floor where the windows are up. These were the pictures taken immediately after Oswald left the building.
There,
And we made the turn to the left. Just a moment. I heard a pop, pop, pop. We didn't know what had happened. We thought, first of all, it might be possibly a backfire because we had motorcycles on either side of us. And then I saw across the bus driver where I was sitting, across him, I saw families scrambling with their children down on the grassy knoll. And then if you give me another picture here, oh, and here's the picture from upstairs. This is the picture out the window. You just saw the open window down below. This is a picture that was shot by a Time magazine photographer, supposedly less than half an hour from the time they found the gun that Oswald had left. So then, now, this photo right here, this is the bus, the White House press bus that I was on, jammed with the journalists from all over the United States. And you see the people scrambling, not knowing what's going on. Well, we didn't know what to do exactly. So we decided that we would go on to where the big luncheon, there was a big luncheon set with 1,000 more people who had been waiting all morning for the president. And here's the picture of the luncheon. Look at the size of this luncheon. They had no clue what had happened less than 2 miles away from them. So we had to decide what to do with the crowd. So I said, let's go on to the Trade Mart, Dallas Trade Mart. We pulled up and I got out and ran up to the front to the master of ceremonies. He was up on this raised table you see here. And I said, we don't know what's happened. We think something terrible has happened. And he said, well, we'll wait just a minute. We'll say a prayer in a minute. And that's the way those people learned that there'd been an assassination. Then we raced on out. I commandeered a car and raced out to Parkland Hospital. And I started looking for Miss Connally. I went to find Miss Connally. I went in a side door, had no lock on it. Went in the dark down the hallway. Here's where the rest of the crowd went, including the media. This was an emergency entrance. And they had already discovered where the president was going, and they were clamoring, trying to get any news at all. And I finally went in and found Ms. Kennedy and Ms. Johnson side by side. Then at 1:11, I believe, this picture you see right here. This picture. See the picture of this gentleman right here, this reporter right in the middle. See this man right here and the look on his face. This is the moment that Malcolm Kilduff, Associate Press Secretary, announced that the president was dead. The shock you see. The minute he finished that speech, I turned around behind him. there was a blackboard up behind him. The minute he finished, I got up to the blackboard. Here is the blackboard.
You had a chance to speak to Mrs. Connolly before this
Yes.
point.
When I found her, I had her tell me what had happened in the car,
Yeah.
what had occurred in the car. So this is what this sketch comes from.
See if we can get this to come on, Julian.
Audio.
It doesn't. I have very few duties here. You'd think I could do this one, but it doesn't seem to. I can't find the spot to turn the audio on. You go back one and then come back. I'm going to pause.
All right, so you want to pick up?
Yes, we're recording now. So,
All right.
and here are you giving a live briefing to the gathered press corps about what Mrs. Connolly told you about the shooting.
Yes, I'll be right back. Yes, sir. Then we see, of course, the headlines went out all over the world. This was, I think, one of the last times that we actually had extra papers. You saw news people go up and down roads with these papers. It was that big a news, something that we've never seen probably since then. And here is a picture, this drab, sad picture of the dining hall in Austin.
This was the $100 a plate dinner.
This is $100 a plate. And I want to call your attention, if you will look up in the top in the corner, in the background, the round white looking red star, yes. That is the official seal of the president. Forlorn, alone, no people, nobody else. Obviously, we had thousands of people who had come all the way to Austin for that moment. And they were loose in town, nowhere to go. And Ben Barnes, a young member of the House of Representatives, had the idea that we'd have a prayer vigil. And that's what they did. This is the chamber, the Capitol chamber, state of Texas. And that's what they had. They had a prayer vigil that evening and invited people, anybody who wanted to come, to be there. And they, of course, had a very forlorn evening. The untold part of the story, of course, I mentioned it briefly. I'll come back to that. Go ahead and take that, Boyd. That's okay. Take that shot. This is Mrs.
That's Nellie Connolly, isn't it?
Nellie Connolly, doing one of numerous interviews she did for the media. We would obviously kept the press up to date on what was going on during the stay there. We had her, she spoke to the media a couple of times, speaking from a standing position, but this is other times when she just briefed it as. Then there's another picture there, I believe. This is a picture. This is a unique occurrence that took place. All the media was screaming to hear from John Connolly. Obviously, he had been shot almost. I barely mentioned the governor, and that's not an oversight. It's just that there's so much to cover. Any other time, it would have been an 8-column headline itself. It just happened to the day that the President of the United States was killed. But here he was speaking to Martin Agronsky, who was a very prominent newsman with NBC, who flew overnight from Washington to come down. We had been asked by all the press, they had to hear from Governor Connally. Since he had been in the car, they wanted to get an eyewitness from him. So Martin Agronsky spoke to him, and this was set up because Governor Connally was very weak. I wanted to put a limit on what the press coverage was. And so we required that we would have only one person to interview him. And this was a gentleman that we knew and trusted, and the ground rules were that all the networks, there were only 3 networks in those days. Remember, just 3 major networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC. And this gentleman spoke for all 3 of them. And the deal was that all 3 networks had to take the entire interview without any cuts in it. And that was a unique kind of occasion that you normally would not try to request at all. Anyway, that's more of the coverage that went on for weeks and weeks. Later on, you'll see a picture here. I believe, here we are, of course, for the funeral service in Washington. Of course, that was an incredible world event. Very dramatic picture of the family and President Johnson and others in the background that you can see there. Mm-hmm. We had Johnny, the eldest son of the Conleys, represented the Connally family. Of course, they couldn't attend, obviously. So he was there as a guest. The Johnsons were kind enough to sort of embrace him and took him with them everywhere. And he was attending and representing the Conleys at the funeral in DC. Here is a picture of Dealey Plaza, back to where scene of the crime. Dealey Plaza, of course, has been redone 50 years later for the 50th anniversary. Dealey Plaza, where the Dealey Museum is. And that's something I represent to you. Dealey Plaza is actually now the center of all of the historical attractions surrounding this tragedy. I recommend it to you, and they have just at the plaza have just come out with a new virtual program for the this final, the current anniversary celebration. There's lots to see up there. I think we have another picture here of an interior shot. I believe we have one of the, there's, this is Governor Connally.
I got to hit, there's the interior.
There he is. Here we are.
Yeah.
This is just one display up there. There have been so many theories, so many different theories of what happened. It couldn't be just one man. We just couldn't be one man caused all this. Well, now the Dealey Museum over there actually has a large sign devoted to 4 or 5 of the most prominent theories of what else might have happened, rather than just one man killing Kennedy. So if you want to go and see all those, you can see those along with all the rest of the story. That final picture, nearly the final picture you saw, was Governor Connally weeks later. Of course, he was confined to a sling. He came very near dying. Mrs. Connally pulled him down. She pulled him down in a limousine just to pull him down and protect him. And in so doing, she closed a gaping hole in his chest was blown open by the shot.
I had never heard that before.
The doctors say that had she not pulled him down, just in an act of God's love, that he never would have made it off the table. Anyway, he was there for weeks, and here he was back in the mansion finally, and a happy day visit between him, Ms. Connolly, and Mrs. Johnson and President Johnson. Needless to say, it's not a scene they would want to repeat.
Dallas had quite a legacy from this event.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that came following, Dallas was labeled immediately as a city of hate. It was labeled a city of hate. And it was incredible how much that manifested itself. Actually, people traveling from Dallas who were identified traveling were sometimes turned away from hotels. It really happened. The head of the largest foundation in Dallas was literally physically thrown out of a cab in New York when they learned he was from Dallas. It became merciful, horrible. Dallas, city of hate. There had been things happening. I've talked about them before there, and this just raw hatred. Interestingly enough, as a sidelight, two things helped finally people quit asking about Dallas when you went to travel overseas. Instead, believe it or not, they asked about the Cowboys, and they asked about what was Dallas, the story, Dallas.
Oh, J.R. Ewing.
J.R. Ewing.
Yeah.
In fact, one prominent newsman came back from London once and told me that they asked the newsman, do you know the Ewings well? But anyway, finally, Dallas got something else to talk about. But I don't want to make light of it ever. But anyway, it took years for Dealey Plaza Museum to come about because Dallas really didn't want to do anything about it. They wanted to just hush it up. But when they did it well. They did it magnificently. And Nellie Conley was requested to dedicate it when it was finished 7 years ago. She made the presentation there at Dealey Plaza. Two more things I believe we have here. Oh, I mentioned these. This is just a sample. This final picture is exactly where the parking lot across from
Texas
the
Hotel.
hotel in Fort Worth.
The Texas
where
Hotel.
The president spoke.
Yeah.
Yes. It's now a, what did I say? What hotel it is. Anyway, across the street, they have built this magnificent plaza that you see there with the huge likeness of the president himself, and then a number of beautiful paintings and photography saluting the president and Ms. Kennedy. And this magnificent thing across from the Hilton, it's the Hilton Hotel, is well lighted, and it operates 24 hours a day as a very popular gathering place for people who love history. And inside the hotel, there quite is a gathering of magnificent pictures and stories, articles about the Kennedy assassination. So that's highlights of a memory that will never go away. I don't think it's going to be much longer that I'll be one of the few who were on the bus that day. As time goes on, obviously more of us pass, but in my heart, my mind, it will be an experience that will forever burn my soul. And
we really appreciate you, really appreciate your sharing this with us this evening, Julian. And it's a remarkable personal history and description of the events leading up to and during and after the assassination. I would mention that copies of your book are available in the Westminster Library for people that haven't read it yet, and I recommend it to them. So, is there anything else you'd like to say before we tell everybody good night?
No, Boyd. Thank you for the opportunity to share it with. This is the first time for y'all, for your listeners' information that we have ever utilized the photos in a display.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those with us, and
you're welcome. I'm glad to do it. Thank you.
And so to you and to all of our fellow residents out there, stay well and stay safe. Have a good evening.